So for our first plant list, we're going to be going over the genuses spruce, Andromeda, and pine. Now, for the genus spruce, the Latin name is Picea. For Picea, you can identify this genus by focusing on these most important identification keys. The first one, look at the needles of the spruce. Before trying to narrow down the species of the spruce tree, first you have to make sure that you're not looking at, other evergreens like a fir or pines. So you can examine the needles of the tree. That's the easiest way to make this distinction between them. The needles of a spruce are actually attached individually to its branches, as opposed to clusters, such as pine. Um, they also have four sides, and you could roll the needles between your fingers. And this is easily done. So, by taking the needle off of the stem, by rolling it, seeing if you have four sides to that needle, and that will indicate that you are dealing with Picea. The needles of pine trees grow in clusters as well. This makes it immediately, you can distinguish from spruce trees to pines because with pines, it's in pascals or the bundles, and in spruces, it's single. Now you just have to determine between a spruce and fir. And you can distinguish this because spruce tree needles are usually sharp and pointed and easy to roll between your fingers. Now, fir needles are a lot flatter and less pointy, and it can't be rolled between your fingers. Another way to determine what you're dealing with is examining the cones. The cones of a spruce tree are also a good way to identify this. Cones from this tree grow from tree branches and contain the seeds of a tree. Spruce cones have small, thin scales and are very flexible and easy to bend. Now, on the other hand, pine cones have scales that are thick, rough, and woody, which makes the cones not easy to flex. Another way to indicate what you're dealing with is by feeling the branches. The needles of spruce trees grow out from small woody pegs from the branches. And when the needles fall from the tree, these pegs are left behind. And this also gives the branches a rough feel to it. The branches of fir and pine trees lack these stalks, and therefore it feels a lot smoother than those of spruce trees. Another indicator is looking at the shape of the branches. Spruce trees are bushy and full, and they have upturned branches. Fir trees, on the other hand, have downturned branches, making them very easy to distinguish. And then pine trees have an upturned branches, but they have fewer branches, which makes them look slightly sparser than spruce trees. Our first species within spruce or Picea is Picea abies. So this is in the family Pinaceae. And then for light preference or the sun preference, Picea abies prefers full sun to partial sun. And for the soil preference, Picea abies prefers more moist and well-drained soils. It doesn't like that saturated soils or soils that are dry. The needles with Picea abies are angular and four-sided as well. It has yellow, green in color, and it's about half to 1 inch long and slightly curved. More of the needles are borne on the upper surface of the twigs, where they usually have a point forward. And the foliage appears to droop or weep. The cones are usually 4 to 7 inches long, have a light brown appearance, and they hang down. Norway spruce usually grows 75 to 100 feet tall and can reach this height within 50 years. So this is considered a moderate to fast growing tree, especially when it's young. The hardiness zones are between 3B through 7. And the mature shape is pyramidal with branches that hang down, and they're stiff when they're young but become more graceful with age. The next one that we have is nest spruce, and that's Picea aves nidiformis, and this is a cultivar of Picea aves. And you can see that this is a dwarf conifer, and this could be used for evergreen borders um, and as a containerized plant. This cultivar has an outward curving branches with dense dark green needles that create a very interesting bird's nest effect. It looks like a bird's nest, hence the name. This cultivar is very hardy and wind resistant, and it's also very slow growing, requires very little maintenance, and it still has the same cultural characteristics as Picea aves as well. The next plant that we're going to be covering is Picea glauca cultivar conica, and that's dwarf Alberta spruce. We have the same family. The light preference or the sun preference is full sun to partial sun, and that soil preference is also the same, the nice, moist, well-drained soils. And this is a cultivar from Picea glauca, which is white spruce. The needles of Picea glauca conica are very stiff and pointed. They're approximately a half inch to 0.75 inches long. Um, and they also contain 2 to 5 stomatal bands on both sides of those needles. So there's going to be like white bands along the needles. These bands can be white to a medium green in color. Now, if you crush the needles, they have a smell often described as skunky or somewhat like cat urine. So, as we discussed before, you really need to get these plants, get the leaves, see what they smell like, what they feel like. So, here's a nice scent here. Not really for the best, but it's going to distinguish Picea glauca conica from other plants. So Picea glauca conica is the cold hardiness zone is 2. It's native to northwestern North America, and it has a narrow conical form. The branches are held horizontally, and it grows 40 to 60 feet tall and has a 10-foot to 20-foot wide range as well. This is considered a medium growth rate for trees, this tree, and this is also very dense. The texture of the needles and branches are very dense when it's young, but as time goes on, it becomes more loose and open with age. Here we have normal dwarf branches on the left-hand side. You can see how it's very nice and dense, like we usually see with dwarf Alberta spruce. And then on the right side, we have reverted branches. This commonly occurs with different cultivars. It could revert back at any point. So here, this is the same exact plant that we don't have two plants growing together, but that's what's coming here. So that's the regular Picea glauca coming off from the right-hand side and being reverted back to its natural point. Now we have Picea omerica, and that is Serbian spruce. Now you see we still have the same family. The light preference is going to be partial sun, not full sun, not complete shade, but that partial sun. And then our soil preference is moist, well-drained soils. Now the leaves or the needles with Picea omerica has flattened bright green needles that have a silvery underside as well. The cones are about 2.5 inches long and they emerge as this violet purple, but when they mature, it turns into a yellowish brown coloration. Picea omerica typically grows 50 to 60 feet tall, but it could rise as much as 100 feet tall in its native habitat. And the form of this tree is narrow or pyramidal and has a spiral-like tree with pendant branches. Now we have Picea orientalis, or the oriental spruce. We have the same family. The light preference is full sun to partial sun, and then we have the soil preference of a moist, well-drained soil. The needles on Picea orientalis are flattened, and they also are glossy, dark green needles that are about a half inch long. and are shorter than the needles of other species of spruces. So you can determine this by looking at its very small, very short needles. So here with the cones of Picea orientalis, the small pollen-bearing cones are usually red, and that's male, which is on the left-hand side of the screen. And then we have the seed-bearing cones, which is female on the right-hand side of the screen. That's 4 inches long. And these turn purple at first when they're immature, and then as maturing, they turn brown. Picea orientalis is a medium to large growing tree and it's densely branched. It has a narrow pyramidal evergreen conifer shape and typically grown in cultivation to grow 50 to 70 feet tall. Now we're going to move on to Picea pungens variety glauca, and this is blue Colorado spruce. We have the same family here. The light preference is a full sun to partial sun, and soil preference is moist, well-drained soil. Now the leaves or the needles with Picea pungens variety glauca spread more or less around the whole entire stem, and it's more crowded above. It's stiff and stout, and it's very prickly to touch. These needles are usually 2 to 3 centimeters long, and then again, we have that four-sided appearance whenever you rub it between your fingers. There's also those stomatic lines on each side of these. So you're going to see a line going through the needles on each side of those four-sided needles. If you want to be brave enough to try it, it's going to have a very acidic taste when chewed. The cones are cylindrical and they're 5 to 10 inches long as well. The tree is upright, broad, and has a pyramidal habit, and it maintains that blue color as we like to see.